Welcome to the Industry of UX, Episode 2. My name is Filippo, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with my former boss and longtime mentor, Jill DaSilva. Jill has an amazing life story. She spent decades in the industry of UX and design. During our chat, we talk about the diversity in background of folks approaching UX and the fact that you don't need any graphic design or UI design background to be an effective UX designer. We also have a couple of different UX stories, some UX misses, some UX wins, and we do have a very interesting client story right at the end of the episode, so make sure to listen to the entire thing. You can show support for this podcast by subscribing to the Industry of UX on one of your favorite podcast apps. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, and Podbean. And you can leave us a comment on YouTube or Podbean. We would love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And here's Jill DaSilva.
I started coding when I was 8, and I had no idea that that would lead to any type of career that I have now. I just loved it. And then I've done so many different types of jobs. I worked in retail. I worked in mortgage banking. I was an elementary middle school teacher. I taught yoga. I've been designing digital products since the early 2000s, making my own websites, making websites for friends. And then I decided I had my own business, and I was making baby carriers and pet carriers, and I was designing the product, designing the websites, everything else. And I decided that I didn't want to have my own business, but I liked building up businesses for other people. I liked doing the design. I liked working with the software tools. And I just kind of had an epiphany, like a deep knowing one day that, okay, I needed to go back to school as an adult. I was a single mom at the time, and I moved from Orange County to Santa Monica. I did my research. I looked up different schools in different places, and I was looking, I did a search about different programs, and cost was definitely a factor. And I looked at Art Center, I looked at Otis, I looked at Santa Monica College. I looked at schools down in Orange County, and I found Santa Monica College. They had everything that I needed. I was able to go back to school as an adult learner and do their web design and graphic design program. And I finished that program. It was a 2-year program. I finished it in a year and a half. It was the only time I was ever on the dean's list with A's. And then I was able to, because I'd had my own businesses before, after I was done with school, and my teachers hired me, and then a startup hired me, and I was able to advance in some leadership positions just because of my age, life experience, and having had my own business. And, it kind of skyrocketed from there. And I think, right now, after teaching at GA and where you and I met at Dex after that and everything, while I was teaching at GA, I realized that there were a lot of really talented designers in my class, UX designers, and they didn't have the portfolio yet that they needed to get hired, but I knew that they were highly skilled. And I'm like, you know what? I'll work with them. So while I was teaching, I was doing at least one side project at a time, just to stay relevant. I don't like it when professors are kind of like, they don't practice what they preach, or they don't have real life experience. Yeah. So I tried to stay relevant so I could always bring that back to the classroom. And I slowly, evolved from teaching into running my own agency to where I could continue to help mentor emerging designers. And I still do that on a continuing basis. I wanted to do it en masse, but it's not possible. I'm not able to give that much attention to everyone and the client work. So I've only been able to do that very slowly. I run my own agency. I still mentor. I give about an hour a week away for free to help emerging designers. What else do? I do a lot of work with Adobe. I teach and speak for them. I do a lot of design work for them as well. I help them. I'm kind of an evangelist with their enterprise clients about Xd, and I train teams, and I help them improve their workflow by incorporating Adobe Xd. A lot of teams are still working in Photoshop for their deliverables as well. Yeah. So helping them transition into something that's more useful to them. What else do I do? Yeah, so I still do client work, and I am a mom. And I think the most fulfilling thing that I do right now is where I'm able to help other people. So whether it's through education, mentorship, or even just finished a research project, being able to help that company find out what they needed to find out so they could make the next steps in their product decisions. So I don't know. I think that's why I love this career, is because there's so many opportunities to help other people.
I'm always impressed when you go through your background and how you got where you are at right now. And it's always humbling, because sometimes I think about myself as someone that has been in the industry of UX for quite some time, being that I spent 15 years in the design industry and then the last 10 in UX. So 15 on one side, 10 on the other.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, they overlap for those 10, right? It's not 25 total.
I'm like, you're not old enough for that.
And I was talking about this with Paul in the first episode of the Industry of UX, and he was mentioning how he actually has been in UX for 14 years.
Wow.
And then, you've been in so much longer. I mean, I'm impressed with you starting to code at age 8. That's alone impressive. And then you've done so many things throughout your life. It's very inspiring. And one of the best traits for UX is humility, right? Staying humble and knowing what you don't know, and knowing that you're always likely to learn something from any experience. And I definitely see that in you all the time. It doesn't matter how much experience you acquire, it doesn't matter how much honors and awards and collaborations you get to experience. You always stay humble. Like in the past, because we go way back. We go way back to 2012.
Yeah, 8 years. Holy crap.
8 years. So in these past 8 years, man, you have the same humility and the same attitude towards the industry of UX as you had when I started working with you. Like your passion has never ceased or diminished or dimmed. Like you moved from initiatives to working full time, and then we also worked together. We worked together in corporate for I think 3 or 4 years. 3 years. 3 years. I see. Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah.
And you actually hired me to work with you as a contractor for Digital Karma, which is your agency, your UX and design agency. Maybe I'm butchering it. UX strategy agency. Sorry,
I'm not sure.
I don't want to. I want to make sure that I don't butcher it. All right. And we worked together there for a year to a year and a half, and I actually later on I want to go over some of those stories, because I think that there are a couple that are very entertaining. Yes. That I've something that I wanted to tell everyone listening is that you mentioned that you did a lot of teaching and at GA. GA stands for General Assembly, right, at the Santa Monica campus of General Assembly. Mm-hmm. And I know for a fact that you had a lot of different students from a lot of different walks of life coming in to learn UX. Can you? Yeah. I mean, my question for you will be: what are the sort of like the biggest or the most interesting folks that you have met during your experience at GA, like folks that have approached UX that you would have never thought that they could have done that?
Yeah. So what was cool about teaching at General Assembly was it was not only just a lot of students from a lot of different walks of life, but we had people flying in from all over the world to come and take this course. So it was a very international class, and I loved it. It was very blended between male and female. It didn't, development seems to have leaned more towards males, and I liked that this was kind of split between male and female. As far as people that you would think, wow, how did this person end up in UX design or what they're doing? In fact, I just had an event this week that had one of my former students in there. And I think she was studying, I might get this wrong, but I think she was studying neuroscience and ended up becoming a UX designer. And now she's a founder of a company. There was one person who I'm not sure how young he was, and I hope that if he hears this, he doesn't mind me saying this, but he was basically delivering pizzas living in his parents' house. And I think he was a drummer in a band. And I'm not sure what type of life experience, I can't remember fully what he had before, but not much. But he had the attitude of someone who is I'm going to find the right word, kind of a lifelong learner, a growth mindset. And after taking the course, he did some hustling and is now kind of advanced his way up through some really cool agencies. Another person I thought was interesting walk of life, she was a ventilator care nurse and no design background, no product background whatsoever. But she was really good at having hard conversations, which I think is from her past experience. I'm sure she had to deal with death a lot, had to deal with bureaucracy, had to, all kinds of stuff she had to deal with. And she was really great at making the room light and having hard conversations, serious conversations, without upsetting anyone. And I think that, again, that comes from her past experience as a nurse.
With that said, I think that a misconception is that a lot of folks that join UX come from either design, like visual design, UI design, graphic design, either that or devs. So developers, engineers. So I've always wondered, and you have way more experience than I do, and you have so many more data points. Is that actually true? Are the most folks coming from graphic design to UX or dev to UX compared to any other profession?
I have two things to say about that. I think that there were people, maybe they were doing product management as well. There might be some product managers. There may be people that were involved with marketing or sales that came in as well. I think, though, you are correct. I think the people that transition into UX design, maybe they tried coding, they didn't like it because they wanted to be more ahead. They tried it for a little bit and they were getting things, they were like, these things aren't going to work. This doesn't make sense. I want to be at the front of the decision-making process of what a product's going to be. So I think that's true. And I think there are a lot of people that were doing some kind of visual design or graphic design or UI design. There's definitely a decent amount of them. I think what I want to say about that is that the ones that came in as visual designers were some of the hardest students to teach. And the reason they were hard, in my opinion, is because, and the reason that this was a challenge is that they were so used to making their stuff look good and look pretty and pixel perfect, but they weren't quick it was a slower transition for them to listen to feedback, listen to any type of design feedback and criticism, and it was very personal to them about their work. Right. And but people that didn't have that background, they were more open to feedback. They were more open to these types of things. So I think that was really interesting kind of takeaway. And yeah, there was at least one that was just, I'm not sure what that person is doing right now, but particularly challenging to work with because it was more about the look than the usefulness. And I think usefulness has to come first. Oh, I thought of something else, Filippo. I had one student that came from kind of, what was it? They were basically testing drugs or something on animals. It came from that background. And then we had some entrepreneurs. One owned a boba tea shop, and is now doing great in design. So yeah, it comes from anywhere. There's no one straight path into UX design. But back to your other question about who's going to transition in, I think you're right. I have another thing to say about that. There are a lot of people that were in UI design or visual design or graphic design before who don't take any courses on UX design, and because of the shift in the market added UX to their title, UX UI or something, but they were never really testing with users. They were never really doing any kind of testing. And I think it was a job search strategy for them to add
Right.
UX to the title when they didn't really have those skills.
I remember one UX event that I attended while I was living in Southern California. There was this group of designers, and they were literally talking about doing that, looking at where the market is and just moving over to just putting in your title. Because I mean, at the end of the day, sadly, you can fool a lot of different companies, because to this day, UX is still a little bit of a mysterious, magical
Elusive.
alchemy.
Like, what is it?
Exactly.
I don't know what it is, but I know we need it.
Exactly. Cool companies have it, so we need it too. I remember I worked for this company a short time when I was living in Southern California before moving to Vegas, and they said that they wanted a senior UX designer or a lead UX designer. I don't remember the title exactly, but UX, right? So heavy, big UX position. So I went in, interviewed, explained, basically I just laid out design thinking, and they were really impressed. They actually gave me the job, but then that's where the UX kind of stopped, because it was all on paper, but in reality, they were not ready, the shift in culture within the company to allow for UX to breathe. There are so many companies out there and so many entrepreneurs that do have a lot of good intentions, and they have the means to create a lot of really impactful products, and they do want to do that, but they start with technology.
Yeah.
Right? They start with, wouldn't this be a great idea? Or we have this technology, how can we shoehorn a user problem into this thing? Or how do we create a use for this? You can't, that's working backwards. You start from the user and you work backwards from that. You don't start from the product, the technology, even worse, the technology. And then you figure out, hey, how can I actually market this thing? We're like, who's going to need it? Whose problem is this going to solve? You should have asked that before.
I remember this project, and we tried so hard to get them to be like, well, what problem are you actually solving? And oh no, we got this great idea. We got this technology. We got this dev team. We've already built most of everything.
Everybody wants it.
Everybody wants it. Like, but who really? How do you find out that everybody wants this? And, we're going to be disruptors. It's so frustrating that, the number one reason companies and startups fail is lack of need in the market. And without understanding the need that you're solving for, you can't be successful. It's just not, you have to solve some kind of need. And that one. And I remember we were trying to test it. We came up with ways to test this idea, but I'll go into the details, and maybe it's too vague for people that are listening, but everything we wanted to test, they were like, no, we don't need to test it, and it was they needed to figure out how are they going to get adoption. Because part of it, if there is no need, then you have to do this huge marketing campaign to convince people that they need it, and can I, if I may, you can cut this out if you want, but I remember that project it failed. Everybody, a lot of the team members who had gotten funding had spent money on cars and TVs and things like that. And then some of the founders ended up getting sued because they'd taken the money and done nothing with it. And, almost got us pulled into legal conversations about, well, whose fault is this now? And I'm like, dude, not ours. We wanted validation. We wanted testing. We wanted to prove this model actually needed to happen.
That's, I would call a UX miss. But I want to hear one of your UX wins. So when actually UX was included in the product, in the company, and it actually, the product and the company did benefit from it.
Yeah. Well, first I want to vent about something along that path, if I may. I'm taking this now as a therapy session. Thank you, Filippo. It's a catharsis for me. I had another client that we did research. He even sat in on the research. We told him what was good, what we thought he should do, and how things should be done. But he was just sure that he was right about things. and I was still on an email list, and I did get to see my ideas, or the ideas of mine and the other designer I was working with on this project, year or two later, finally implementing those and understanding that, like, oh, I'm like, I told them so, like I told, so and I think that company is actually doing pretty good right now. So I think somewhere in the back of their mind, like some of the suggestions we made, we saw them come to fruition, which was great.
That's a win.
I think that counts as a win. Yeah. Like, it didn't happen while I was there, but it happened after. And I was like, okay. And I would share this message with my friend, my colleague who worked on this with me. And I'm like, see, they're finally doing it. And like, we told them to do it. And it was a startup. They could have implemented these things earlier, but I think it took them a while to really trust other people. I think that's the other big challenge as a designer. Like, do people trust you to be that expert? Or are they just like, again, are they hiring you just to push pixels around? And I think right now I'm at a place in my career where I can say no to the pixel pushing jobs and more have a decision, to make those things. I also had one win, and I think you and I worked on this together. I think that this was a win when we were working at our corporate job together. We had done some changes, some redesigns to a page, but we were lucky. That company believed in testing. They believed in metrics. They believed in even A/B testing. And we were able to create some basic updates to one of the landing pages. And I still use this metric because a lot of times I work on projects and I don't stay with them to follow it through. And I don't do a lot of metric tracking of successes, but this one had an increased success rate of 54% immediately based on the changes that we had made. So I think that, it's important to have a job and a role where you can actually effectuate those positive changes. I think if you don't have that role, you're going to get really frustrated. So anyway,
Yes.
that was a win for us.
That was a great win, and I do remember that project, and I do remember exactly what we did. And that goes to show that when you include the customers, include the users in the process, and you empathize with them, you listen to them, and you put them at the center of what you do, then of course you're going to start tracking metrics in a positive trend, because especially if they are user metrics.
Right.
This was specifically, I remember 54% was engagement, which was a huge win because we were actually making quite a bit of money from that engagement. And that was only done via listening to the users and implementing, their feedback and understanding exactly where the problems, the frustrations were, and just do the UX thing. And it was easy. It was effortless. I remember it wasn't, we didn't have to fight too much. I mean, that's definitely a win that I still remember. That's a good one.
I like that one a lot because, again, they trusted us to make these right decisions, and we didn't have to fight for the metrics; those were already built in. And what was cool about it, it was a win for the business and the end user. So, it was 8 years ago, but I still remember it.
So I actually want to talk a little bit about, I guess I have my last big question before I'm actually going to summon you to tell the story of the chair. Okay. So we talked about UX wins. We talked about UX misses. We talked a little bit about how some folks approach UX via education and the fact that they come from all walks of life. And, you don't necessarily have to have previous design knowledge to be a very successful UX designer.
Right.
But we talked, we jumped a little bit around. That's perfectly fine. Because honestly, we could talk for hours about only you, about the things that you've done in the past, only like say 3 years, right? The fact that now you live in a beautiful house in the Malibu hills that I had the privilege to actually come visit, and it's amazing. Just the drive up there, on the drive alone, is just worth doing, especially when you get off the PCH and you start driving up. Oh my God, that reminds me of Italy so much. But anyways, I see how easily I digress. Anyways.
Well, I love it. But I think there is a point to that too. Like, it's taken me a while, but I was able to design my own life, with help of others, obviously, but I was able to get to a place where I'm like, okay, this is where I want to be. This is the kind of life I want to have. This is This is how I want to live for myself and my son. And so, use some of those skills, definitely a lot of hard work and time to get here. But, I think that's part of it. Jobs are kind of a means to an end. And it's definitely helped me get to where I want to be.
Well, thank you for sharing that. But I also have my last big question,
Yes,
which is you have a super cool background and super cool experiences, because you are one of the few folks that I have ever met that both has a corporate type of experience, but also an agency type of experience, but not just agents as in I was hired by an agency, because you are still somewhat an employee, but actually running a UX agency.
Yeah.
What are the overlaps between these two big experiences, like the corporate world or the employee world versus being out there on your own as a UX designer and CEO, owner, president, however you want to, doing all of that?
Yeah. I think about this question a lot. I think about this. And, even though we have our own agency, I have my own agency, and I still have clients. So my clients are still my bosses in some ways. And the cool part is that I have more freedom to say no, or I have the freedom to say yes to certain things. I get to now, not in the beginning, not as much when first starting out, but I get to choose what projects I work on and what I don't work on. And again, being able to say no, I think is the biggest difference. And there's no politics. It's not the same as an employee at a place. And instead, it's just I get to be of service to people versus an employee that's maybe worried about layoffs or firings. I think my biggest, the other difference is it's not that way now, thank goodness. But in the beginning, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to need clients. How am I going to stay working? Like that was always the insecurity. If you're working for someone, you don't have to worry about that. But again, that's kind of a fallacy again, because layoffs can happen. Companies can merge and get shut down. So I think stability, security is a fallacy, but it's different. That onus now is on me to bring in those clients and make sure things run smoothly. I don't think I could ever, in fact, before the pandemic happened, the benefit of having my own agency was I could work from home. And I've been working remote now for about 4 years. So that didn't change a lot with the pandemic. I don't do any more face-to-face client meetings, but other than some collaborative moments with clients, most everything can be done remotely. So I think that's pretty cool. So I think, some of the differences are ability to say no. I don't have to be annoyed that someone above me made dumb decisions.
Yeah. Yep.
And if I make a bad decision, the only person I'm gonna be upset with is myself. And I think that's good. So. Yeah.
Well, okay. So that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see that, especially, the part where you mentioned, I don't have bosses above me anymore, as in, the corporate hierarchy or the corporate ladder, but I do have, customers or clients that I do have, that I'm accountable to, right? The freedom of saying no, but also if you say no, well, that might go. And now you still have bankroll and you still have
rent, food,
utilities and all of that. So
yeah.
I think it's time for the chair story.
The chair story. Filippo, I think you're going to tell it better than me, but I honestly, I kept remembering it a little bit as we were talking about these other things, and I kept feeling to myself, but okay, I'm going to try, but I want you to fill in the blanks. Okay. So we went to go meet a potential new client with someone else. So this person, I'm going to give probably more details than I should. This person ran a dev company, and he would hire us on occasion to do the UX for the clients. And oftentimes, back to what you're saying earlier, they would start with the engineering and be like, okay, we need to bring design in. And he tried to bring design in earlier and earlier. But we go to this one place. I forget it was this odd meeting place, and they had kind of vintage furniture, and they had this.
Yep.
We go and we sit.
Vintage is the key word. Vintage. Not,
It's
not
trying
just
to be
in looks. That's not just the vintage looks.
No, it was legit vintage furniture. And I remember we go and sit in the what was the little office with the whiteboard, or their meeting room, and they had an eclectic mix of chairs. One of the guys sat down on the chair, and I forget what we were doing. I don't even think I saw it. I think you saw it. I saw it out of the corner of my eye. And all of a sudden, this guy's down on the floor. He and I think I'm remembering the story right. And we're like, what happened? But it was this clear kind of plexiglass chair that probably had a weight limit on it, right? Or it was just old. I don't know. But
it was probably just old. Honestly,
I think it was just old.
It was about to go.
So we're not going to blame it on the person who sat in the chair. Oh my God, all of a sudden that person was down. They hopped up like a champ. But what am I missing in that story? I feel like I'm missing some key details. I might be mixing two stories.
No, actually, that's actually what happened. But there are a couple of key details here that are important. Okay. So the guy that sat in that chair was not just a regular guy, but that was actually the client.
Oh, it was the client.
That was the client. So you and I were there to talk to him, and he was the potential client, actually.
Yeah.
So it was Jill, myself, this dev guy that had the dev agency, and then the potential client that the dev guy brought in for us to work with, right? Kind of a referral. And the client is there kind of puffing his chest, explaining his big idea. He was
being super cocky.
It was being super arrogant, right? So he set the stage that way, and we were listening, Jill and I, and he set the stage of being, a cocky entrepreneur, kind of bold and
smart. You guys like, you don't talk to me.
Exactly. And then you hear this loud crack, and the guy just disappears.
There you go.
He just fell on his ass so hard. And I remember it like it happened 2 minutes ago. I turn around. Jill turns around, we look at each other in the face, and we have this poker face, like nothing actually happened. Like we're actually staring at each other with a calm expression. And then we both look at the guy, and he's on the ground. That guy helps him stand up, and then we kind of go over the table to make sure that he's okay. And the chair is in 1,000 pieces. Like that was, I don't know if it was, I don't know what, I think it was old plastic. So
yeah, it was
the guy fell so hard. If you remember, we gave him a new chair that we actually tested a little bit before. And all of the air of but arrogance and cockiness and all that just left the room with the old chair.
That's right. He was super friendly after that.
Sweeping out the pieces of the old chair, all of his attitude went out with that. And then it was a great guy to work with for the rest of the meeting. We actually did get the client and get the job, and we started working with him. And that's the end of my chat with Jill. Thank you so much for listening until the end. Be sure to subscribe to the Industry of UX on one of your favorite podcast apps. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, and Podbean. We'd love to hear your feedback, so make sure to leave a comment on YouTube or Podbean and visit theindustryofux.com. Thank you so much for listening again, and I hope you have a wonderful day.